And good morning and welcome back to Mirador Television in the White Hart Hotel, Lewis. And here he is, Harry Atherton. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning to you.
And today you're in Shropshire.
Yes, it's an absolutely delightful town of Ludlow, full of history.
You're turning into our Michael Portillo.
Oh, really? I've seen him.
Tell us about Ludlow.
Sure. Oh, but it's a beautiful town. It's about 10,000 population. It's full of history. It's one of the quaintest little towns. And what's impressed us so far is the quality of the welcome, the quality of the restaurants. Amazing. And difficult to get into because they're full all the time. They're so good. But the food outstanding. It makes me think of a comment made by my French wife, who believes that French cooking has gone down over these past few years and English cooking has gone up. And I believe it. The quality here, I would say, vastly average quality. Some of the good restaurants in France are still excellent, but the average quality of cooking in England is way ahead of France now.
You were obviously out for dinner last night.
Oh, yes, we were. And exotic stuff. There's a little bit of history to this, I guess, and that was that when English food was denigrated around the world, not being very good, there was a period of time when the big chains, the hotels, restaurants brought in French chefs. And it improved considerably. But those French chefs trained a series of young English chefs. And now that's 2 generations on. So you've had the skill passed on between English chefs and French chefs. Also some French chefs in England, of course, but essentially homegrown chefs in England have taken on the role, and they're doing a superb job. Everywhere we've been, we've eaten well.
Well, take us through the menu that you had last night.
Oh gosh, varied. Last night, just to follow tradition, we had a roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. typical thing, but it brought back tears to my eyes, brought back memories of my youth. And but no, I'm talking generally the sophistication, the quality of presentation, the service, the cleanliness, the price is competitive. We haven't been ripped off or anything. It's been very correct. Yeah, fully enjoyable.
Strangely enough, yesterday I have a tendency, since I'm on my own now, of popping out to my local pub to have Sunday lunch, which I did, and I had. Actually, I had pork yesterday, but the food is good, wholesome. It wouldn't win an international awards, but it is very, very acceptable. And guess what? The chef is French.
Oh, wow. Well, that's another phenomenon which I've noticed, and that is that enterprising Frenchmen have bought up quite a number of English pubs. So there is a French influence in what was the traditional English domain. But I think it's fairly rare now, except in the top, multi-star restaurants, to find a French chef. The homegrown English chefs are doing a fine job.
It's interesting, is Lewis, strangely enough, only has two first-class restaurants, and they are quite good. But it has a terrific pub culture. I mean, it's got 16 pubs, and any one of them you would be happy to go into. We don't have one that is a rowdy or where you have to watch your P's and Q's. But I was talking to an analyst, a food analyst, and he said the reason that we've got good pub food but not very good top class restaurant food is because Lewes has become a dormitory town where people leave in the morning, they go and they have their good food in London, and they come home at night, and all they want to do is either pop out to the pub or have something at home. So it's changed the pattern of eating totally. When I first came to Lewes, there must have been at least 8 to 10 very, very good restaurants. They've all gone. And it's because of the change in the nature of the population.
Now, were you talking about which town there, Keith?
Lewes.
Lewes, okay.
Yes.
I know Lewes a little bit. I've visited 2 or 3 times, and I don't recall eating in Lewes. So I take you're closer to it than I am now, and I accept fully what you're saying. But I think when we think of pubs and food, we're looking at a different dynamic. The pubs, what with the drink driving laws years ago and getting more draconian all the time, were obliged to turn from drink to food as their main source of revenue. And pub food, I think we should, unless the gastro pubs, which try to move the cooking up market, we should not think of regular pub food as being typical of fine culinary presentation. I think it's a slightly different area than the posh restaurant.
Yeah.
What worries me most is that you say that the good restaurants in Lewes have closed. I didn't know them, but that's a phenomenon which, in fact, you could well be linked to the fact that people are commuting to London, eat in London, and they get home, they're tired, they don't want to go out to eat.
Yeah, well, there are 2 major hotels, one of which you're looking at now, the White Hart, which has a splendid dining room, and all it is used for now is breakfast for those people who have stayed in the hotel overnight. The other one is it's called Shelley, which is actually boarded up. It's not even taking in people to stay, and yet in history they played a very important part in the development of Lewes. In fact, it is said, it is recorded that when we had the rotten boroughs and you voted for a steward to go to Parliament and not an individual MP, is that the stewards used to bribe people by holding lavish parties, one in this hotel and one in Shelley's. And they vied with one another to try and get the votes by having these fabulous parties, and they really were considered to be fabulous. Nowadays, you can't get any. Well, you can get a light breakfast in just one of them.
Yeah, that's a shame. And of course, what we should touch upon, I suppose, is the fact that many pubs are closing down. They got hit by the COVID plague disaster, and the loss of pubs. What we read in the newspapers, international newspapers, Britain has lost about 1/3 of its pubs. I don't know whether that's correct. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and there are pubs closing down all the time. We lost several in Lewes, but it seems to have steadied up at 16. But just for your information, in history, in 1850, this town had 63 pubs and 17 breweries.
My goodness.
And only a population of 9,000. And as I often say, oh, how wonderful. I wish I'd lived in that time. But the reason for it, Harry, is that the water was poisonous. And they made a beer even for kids. So everybody went to the pub.
Well, it's interesting because Britain has prided itself, perhaps it's not the right word, on its beer culture, on its pubs, which are a traditional form of British life. And yet, the consumption of beer, we also understand, has gone down considerably in Britain. I think Britain now ranks about uh, seventh or eighth in consumption per person. The leaders have always been the Belgians, of course, and second it was the old Czechoslovakia, now Czech Republic and Slovakia. Third, I believe, is Germany. Fourth, Australia. Fifth, America, the US. Sixth, would you believe, France, due to the Belgian influence along the Belgian border with France. And that's popped England has slipped back into seventh place. So we're quite ashamed to think that the French drink more beer per head than we do. But, um,
You're
I,
a walking, you're a walking encyclopedia.
well, you see, the problem is that I still enjoy my beer, and living in France, I'm contributing to Britain's decline.
There's no question that there are
Mhm.
two big changes in terms of liquids in this country. One is coffee,
Mhm.
whereas 10 years ago, Lewis High Street had dozens of tea shops. It now has dozens of coffee shops and
Oh,
only one tea shop.
but
But the other is in drinking wine rather than beer.
yes, but the corollary of that is that normally everybody drank coffee in the States. When I lived half my life like you did, and over the other side of the water, and the Americans were renowned for drinking coffee, and the Brits drinking tea. It's reversed. Any many of the posh places in North America now serve tea. You
Oh,
got
really?
you get the coffee chains like Starbucks and what have you, but tea is assumed a great popularity in North America, Canada, the States. It's quite fashionable, in fact, being somewhat English, and the English themselves have gone over to coffee. So there you go.
One of our two North American correspondents, Melissa Conti, went down to Delaware,
Mhm.
and there's a very famous hotel down there which does
Mhm.
afternoon tea. And she
Yeah.
sat with the maitre d' and went through their afternoon tea. And believe me, it would put any tea shop or any restaurant or hotel in Britain to shame. It
Well,
does
that,
things absolutely by the book, and it's a wonderful experience.
well, that supports the argument that tea has become fashionable in the States.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That I think that they now understand. At one time, you could say tea time, and they hadn't a clue what we were talking about. Now
Yes,
they totally understand.
yes. Well, you've got the old British traditions, of course, tea, high tea, and so on and so forth. I don't think that's died out a little bit, I believe, in Britain.
Yes, it
Um,
has. It is.
yeah, but
Now, Harry, you amongst your other skills, became a hotelier, and you actually in renovating some of the chateaux that you've renovated along your very glorious history, became the manager of a hotel, and I think you said for 12 years. So, tell us all about that.
well, I'm somewhat of an unwilling hotel keeper because our purpose was to save these old castles. We were unhappy to see them falling down, and so the goal was to restore them. But it cost so much money, and we weren't wealthy people, and we did it with bank loans that we then had to choose an activity which lent itself to the assuring the permanence of what we'd done. And the first one we did, the first castle we did, was a 100-room castle, which lent itself to becoming a chateau hotel. And we opened a restaurant. We got a top chef, and I would say that essentially that it was my wife, Jacqueline, who managed the hotel. I managed the works, and she ran the hotel. Though, I was up in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning to start the breakfast. She was working until 2 o'clock in the morning with the final diners that left. So it's a very hard, I won't say thankless task, because we got satisfaction out of it. It was a successful operation. We didn't make any money. We just, we made enough to pay government taxes, which was unbelievably high in France. Britain is highly taxed at the moment by comparison to what it was over the past 70 years, but nothing compared to the way Europe and France in particular is taxed. It's and lots of hidden taxes. So it was a very tough 12 years, but satisfying in the sense that it broadened our career experience. But we decided we'd never do it again. And then as we started to restore other castles, we chose different activities for them rather than hotels, hotel restaurants. A tough business, the hotel restaurant business. And particularly, neither was,
We'll go to your other castles in a moment, but how many rooms did you have in this
castle? We didn't transfer all 100 rooms into rooms. We had probably about 20 rooms altogether, but palatial, huge rooms, 50 square meters, 4-poster beds, and you can look it up on the internet if you like. Chateau de Boisse is the name of it, that first one that we transformed into a hotel restaurant. Beautiful property. And so we're satisfied that legacy continues. Though I do believe recently it's been bought by some extremely wealthy people who may just transform it back into a private home, a private castle, which is fine. At least the building its perennity is assured.
Yeah.
Because when we took it over, it hadn't been lived in. We bought it in 1988. Hadn't been lived in since 1933. There were holes in the roof you could put two cars through. Water came down the grand staircase right into the entrance hall. It was just in frightful shape, but we bought it very cheaply, and the costs came, of course, with fixing it up. That was a pretty hairy amount of money involved.
Yeah. And so you turned it into a sort of 20 room hotel.
Well, I think it's probably more now. But when we're talking bedrooms, but then we had the public rooms. We had 3 dining rooms, a banquet room, a main dining room, and a private dining room. So we had no shortage of space. I can't tell you what the entire square footage of the building was, but it's. I did send you pictures of that, I think, at one stage. You weren't able to rescue them. Is that the case?
Well, no, I've got them. And what's happening is that because we were sort of renovating ourselves, as it were, and you starred last Monday by being on the bill that was first seen in the UK. You were a star last week. And indeed, you're a star now. People have been very interested. So you are now amongst our permanent correspondents. And that's why I'm fascinated with you being in Ludlow this week, and said you're a bit like Michael Portillo for us. I should expect you to be in a different place each week.
Well, I'm far from being a star. I'm an old man.
Well, Harry, his age doesn't mean anything when it comes to that. I had Bethan with me this morning for a couple of hours, but she had some domestic things to do, so she left. But she is by far the youngest thing that we've got here, and most of us are either ex-journalists or ex-broadcasters or ex-experts, and we are quite an aged group. But people say they find that refreshing because media has been taken over in the main by the young. But to see and hear and experience what some of us older people do is finding a great deal of favor. So you fit right in, and I don't want you to go away.
Well, what you're saying reminds me of George Bernard Shaw's famous quote about, I think it was GBS that said this, that youth is wasted on the young.
Yes.
So when you reach our age, I'm in my late 80s. I don't recall quite how you are, Keith. Maybe you want to keep that private from the public.
No, I'm 83 now.
83. Well, I'm 87. So it's a time when what you've experienced is worth sharing, or you think it's worth sharing, and it may be helpful to people. And it's funny you should mention about the Michael Portillo role, because next week I'm going to be in Pickering, Yorkshire. Which is a town that I know quite well because I was born in Yorkshire, and my uncle, my father's brother, was once inspector of weights and measures in Pickering. And after he left the police force, he went into the church. He was well into his 40s. He became a vicar, and he actually died in Pickering after giving a wonderful sermon at the beautiful church in Pickering, where the wall decorations were uncovered some years ago, and they're one of the wonders of ecclesiastical wonders of Britain, I think, the church at Pickering, Old Castle, of course, at Pickering. So it's a town I know fairly well. So it'll bring back old memories. But the purpose of going there is that I'm accompanying my daughter and her husband. They're Canadians. They grew up in Canada, where they were, and my third son, one of the 17 children I've got. No, not actually, but it's just a thought. So showing where they were born, Yorkshire, and so we're really looking for to showing them around and my recalling some of the magic moments of my youth. So if you want me to share those with you, I'd be very happy to.
Yes, will you be in Pickering next Monday?
Next Monday, I'll be in Pickering, indeed. Yeah.
Well, we should look forward to hearing from you, and you can tell us all about Pickering then. But tell us a bit more about Ludlow and Shropshire. My memories of Shropshire is climbing up the Wrekin.
Oh yes, well, a little bit early days yet for Shropshire. One of the reasons why I was able to talk about restaurants and pubs so far is that's about all we've seen. We're going to get out today. We're going to Iron Bridge, where the first Iron Bridge is, of course, an amazing structure built by Robert Telford, who also gave his name to the nearby town of Telford. And then we'll be going on to Shrewsbury, ancient town of Salop, unfortunate name if you speak French, the beautiful town Shrewsbury. Looking forward to it. The High Street in Shrewsbury, famous for the Lion Inn, where Charles Dickens wrote David Copperfield. And the room where which he rented for the period of his writing, I think about 6 weeks, is now available. You can rent that and stay there. 4-poster bed. I've seen the room, but I've never stayed there. And so there's a stunning town, Shrewsbury, that we're looking forward to seeing. But the thing that most impressed me about Shropshire so far was the drive-in coming in from the A5 and the valleys and the beauty of the little villages and the architecture, the old architecture. It truly is an unchanged Britain. And it was just a lovely feeling. I felt I was going back in time, and all of the usual, poetic statements you can make about exploring Britain. But Britain has that quality. I've like you, I've lived and worked in many countries around the world, but I've found no country that can compare with Britain. And that's not because I was born British, because I've thrilled to the differences of these other places, but there's a quality in Britain that cannot be found elsewhere. And I'm saddened sometimes when people criticize Britain. Nothing's perfect. Britain's not perfect. Everybody's life is difficult. It's the same. Always the grass looks greener on the other side of the fence. But people who live in Britain, maybe a little bit mismanaged at the moment, but it is a wonderful country, and I feel proud to be part of it, even though I spent most of my life abroad.
Well, as we discussed, his experience is a wonderful thing. And when you've experienced, as you say, living in other countries, is to come back it's thrilling actually. Despite its drawbacks, of course, it's not perfect, but it's thrilling to come home. And I think that the criticisms that are voiced are for those people who've never lived anywhere else.
Yes. Well, it's easy to criticize, and of course, nobody's life is easy. Well, I suppose if you think you've got lots of money and comfort, you think life is easy. But the problems, generally speaking, life's problems hit the more fortunate people. Anything statistically, suicides, pain, illnesses, you name it. The poor people struggling to stay alive and raise a family, they haven't got time to get sick or to feel that they're unhappy and commit suicide. So it's interesting how statistically, well, I don't know why I'm talking about suicides here, but it's in many of the wealthy countries and amongst the wealthy classes that you'll get a higher incidence of suicide because they feel they've got everything, and therefore there's no further challenge left. Whereas the people having a difficult life, their mind is taken up with simply staying alive and feeding their kids and getting them off to school and
no time to think. Yeah,
hoping the car doesn't break down, that sort of thing. I haven't got time to do anything else but struggle.
Yes.
And
now let's go back to talking about happier things and your area of expertise, because you owned and ran a hotel for a number of years. You're staying in a hotel today in Ludlow. You've extolled the virtues of Ludlow. You said how much you love the town. What's the hotel like?
Well, it's not a hotel. It is a holiday cottage which we've taken for a week. It's the Malsters House, and it is a gem. I mean, I just can't tell you how beautifully it is laid out, and the welcome and the lady and her husband who own it have been most helpful, giving us advice. It's palatial. And it's right in the center of town. As I recall, it's not terribly expensive. The price is right. All the facilities you could imagine. So no, it's not. It's a holiday cottage, and we're doing the same in Pickering. We've got a holiday cottage which we're going to there. Ideal way of, and we each have our own bedroom. The kids got their kids 60 years old. Have got their own bedroom and bathroom. It's a delightful place. The Malsters Cottage. By golly, anybody who couldn't do better than coming here, I assure you.
Now, I'm full of admiration for all the skills that you picked up since we first knew one another 50, 60 years ago. And do you do your own cooking in this holiday cottage?
Well, my daughter is a crackerjack cook. She's good, and so is her husband, Mark. I'm a little unsteady on my feet now with my age, and therefore I'm frightened of falling into the frying pan. I've already been in the fire a few times. No, we do our cooking, but we also like to explore the local restaurants.
Right. So last night you had roast beef. What's on the menu tonight?
I think I'm going to have. We've booked in a beautiful old place. I wish I could show you a picture of it. Elizabethan front, and inside excellent food. We've eaten there once already, and I'm going to have some pork tonight. Yes, pork. I think. I forget what it's called. Where it's been. It's not a pork roast. It seems to be strip pork, or a belly of pork. Oh, that's it, belly of pork.
Right, yeah, pork belly.
Pork belly.
Strangely enough, that's what I had for lunch yesterday.
Yes, and so yes, that's what I'm looking forward to this evening.
Right. Now, actually, Harry, you say that you're a little unsteady on your feet. Of course, I've got Parkinson's, which makes me very unsteady on my feet. And yesterday morning, sorry, not yesterday morning, Saturday morning, I spent with a camera going over to the courthouse, which is right opposite to the White Hart Hotel. It's a Crown Court, and they had an open day. And I was able to take a few pictures and to wander around. And apart from reporting on how many people have been sent to the gallows on any given day, is to see where it all happened. But I actually there are lots of steps in there, and I caught my heel and down I went, arse over tip. And, of course, it's very embarrassing when you do that. But the fact is, I've learned how to fall, since it happens to me fairly frequently, so I don't hurt myself. But I gaze up at whoever is, please help me up.
Now, Keith, now you're hiding something there, because you know why you're good at falling for the same reason that I am, is because we both into later life, we both played rugby. I played my last club game at 51, and I think you founded a rugby club. I mean, of which we were both part. So falling over became almost a natural part of our lives. And if we didn't fall over during the game, we've certainly managed to fall over after the game for different reasons.
Do you know, Harry, my memories of you are wonderful. It's mostly to do with rugby, and they pop into my mind when I think about you. And I don't know if you remember, but we decided that this rugby club should have shirts, and you contacted Carling Brewery, and we went along, and we went to Carling Brewery, and we saw the gentleman there, and said we want some shirts, and he said yes, okay, but he said they have to be black and red, because that is the color on our beer. You remember we came away with having struck a deal.
Well, it's quite amazing when you think of a brewery sponsoring a rugby club. It is it's an unholy combination.
Absolutely.
We became their best clients. And no, I do remember that. That's yes, we did get a set of shirts from them, and I'm delighted to know through you and that the old club is thriving. That the one that you founded and that I joined immediately with you, and they're celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. So
and they're writing a book about it.
Then and, indeed.
Is Bob Charworth Musters, whom I'm sure you remember.
I do. He's a banker, became a banker, didn't he, John?
That's right. And he's spearheading the drive to write this book. And he asked me to make a contribution, and I identified you in a photograph. And he's very thorough, so he set about discovering where you were. And I'm delighted he did, because it means I found you as well.
Well, I think a lot of those young men that joined the club have had very successful lives, a grand bunch of people, and I'm happy to know how well they did. They're varied professions, but very successful, and I'm happy for them. And now they've become the elders, and there's a young crowd, I suppose. I don't know how many teams the club has now. Probably has a ladies' team. That's quite fashionable these days, isn't it? So
yes, it is. I think they've got 3 teams plus the ladies. Yes,
right.
And they've got their own clubhouse too.
Indeed. Well, I have had the privilege of going to the clubhouse 4 or 5 years ago when I visited Vancouver for the last time, and beautiful spot they've got, and I was welcomed, and treated like royalty. So, and hopefully may make it back there one of these days. And though I'm not sure that I'll travel that far anymore.
Nor me, but stranger things happen, don't they?
Indeed, they
And
did.
I wake up some mornings and think I'm just going to have an ordinary day, and it turns into an absolute dowser.
Mm-hmm.
Is I like occasionally going back to Vancouver on telly because, like you, I don't know whether I'll get back there in body. But I did actually go to Victoria about 6 or 7 years ago,
Yes.
and because I spent a little bit of time in Victoria because I was the political correspondent for CJOR Radio, and
Okay.
used to cover the opening of Parliament and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I have to say, if the place hasn't changed, it's Victoria. Exactly the way that I remember it.
Lovely. And is the old Empress Hotel still presiding over the harbour? Is it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And I'm sure it's not apocryphal, but I'm told the story that Canadian Pacific, who own it, had planned to actually pull it down. But they had one last board meeting there, and the board was so impressed with it they reversed the order, and so the Empress is still going in full flow,
Yes.
and it's still much the senior wonderful old railway hotel that it is. And I recall in my day is that it used to have Billy Tickle and his orchestra in the
Yes.
Palm Court.
Yes. Yes. Oh no, the Empress that they must never pull it down. I mean, those great Canadian Pacific hotels, going back to when Van Horn built the railway, and as you know, it reached Vancouver in 1887, and they'd built a series of hotels along the track, not the track, along the route that it took to join Western Canada with Eastern Canada, and many of those hotels still survive and doing fairly well, as I suppose. There must have been huge costs involved in renovating them, bringing them up to modern standards. But some of the great hotels of the world, I feel, and the
Yes,
Empress.
they are. They're magnificent hotels. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I
Uh, uh,
love.
I can remember when I first went to Canada, and I arrived in 1958,
Mm-hmm.
which was the last year that more people travelled by ship and train than did by plane.
Yes.
And very briefly, I got off at Lake Louise,
Mm-hmm.
and I to this day I can remember looking at the rivers and the lakes there, and I couldn't believe that water could be so azure blue.
No.
Absolutely incredible.
Did you stay at the hotel there? That's another of the famous railway hotels. Yeah.
I didn't. I've been into its doors. It's I'm trying to think what it's called.
The Banff Springs? No.
Banff Springs Hotel, I think. Perhaps
Yes.
yes, yes.
Yes. Yeah, my daughter worked there and went as a young girl growing up, and yeah, it's a lovely part of of Canada, up in the Rockies and what have you. No, but you got there in '58, so you preceded me by quite. I didn't get there till '65.
Oh,
Um,
really?
but you went to university there, I believe, didn't you?
I did indeed. Yeah, yeah.
And the UBC, University of British Columbia.
Yes, that's right.
So yeah, so you outranked me then in terms of life in Canada. So yeah, it's
Well,
good.
actually, it's funny you say that we look back to our youth, and now I can't believe that I set off on an 8,000-mile journey at the age of 18 with no
Hmm.
chance of coming back
Hmm.
for quite a long time. And now you find youngsters who go off to university and come back home within a week.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, when I went out to Vancouver. I went by boat all the way to Vancouver through the Panama Canal.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so as you say, airlines. I think I took my first airline flight in in um, in um, in Canada. In fact, I did my first ever airline flight in Canada, and rather curious because years later I rose to a fairly high position with Air Canada, and
Yes.
so
Uh,
it's
In fact, your first flight may well have been when we were working for the
yes.
same operation that we were sent to Montreal or the mountains outside Laurentians, I think, for as a big get together, and
Yeah,
we flew from Vancouver to Montreal, and then were bussed up to the Laurentians. Would that
sure.
be right?
Yes. That all rings bells with me. Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing the things we've done together.
Mm-hmm.
Harry, it's 10 to 11. We've spent 41 minutes together
Mm-hmm.
on the air. As you know, I like to keep these things to 45 so that we don't actually. Most people won't watch much over 45. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you're turning into our Michael Portillo,
Oh
and
gosh.
we're going to actually no you. I mean, your description and descriptive powers are excellent, and we're getting the picture of various things, but you know. Quite a lot of places we have these peculiar names in Britain, and we don't actually know much about them. Pickering is a very interesting name. I know nothing about the town at all, and next week I'm going to find out about it. It's a long time since I've been to Shropshire, and I was never in Ludlow, but I've got some feel for it today. And in between time, we've enjoyed our adventures of travel,
Well,
and
I'll give you a little
sorry.
bit of a foretaste of Pickering. We were talking about pubs and restaurants earlier. Well, on one side of the street, Main Street in Pickering, there's an excellent restaurant and pub. It's called the Black Swan. And on the other side of the street, there's an excellent pub and restaurant, and it's called the White Swan. So whether it's black and white, they're very original. So we shall be frequenting both of them, and I hope to give you a full report next week.
Absolutely, looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
So enjoy your day in Shropshire. I've
Mm-hmm.
forgotten where you said you were going next.
We're going to Ironbridge, Telford, and Shrewsbury.
And you're staying in Shrewsbury tonight.
Oh, no, we'll be back here at the Holiday Cottage.
Right. So you're doing a circuit.
Yes, oh, it's not far. It's about, I would say Shrewsbury is probably about half an hour, a little bit more from Ludlow. So it's an easy day's travel. It's not going to be very heavy.
My memory of Shrewsbury, I think I've been through it. I've never been to it, as it were. But it's quite hilly, like
Oh,
Lewis.
it is. It is. As you wind your way up into the center of town through a windy street called Wild Cop, I believe it's called. And then the main street is fairly level, but it is hilly country. I was surprised, in fact, driving into Shropshire this time, how hilly it was. I hadn't conceived of quite that sort of topography, but it's very beautiful, beautiful county. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, we shall look forward to talking to you next week.
With pleasure.
And one of the things that I do plan to do, and so not to embarrass you, is the lovely photos that you've sent. Is I hope to put together into a little feature of about 20 or 30 minutes, because there's some stunning stuff. So on one of these occasions, I shall suddenly say, Harry, shut up and watch this.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Harry.
Delighted to talk to you and see you next week.
Look forward to it.
Okay, Keith. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Well, there we are, Harry Atherton, and now what we'll do is we will hope that we can find Suzanne Mouchot and go from Shropshire to New York. So let's see if Suzanne is around today. I think she is leaving. She's leaving the country, but I'm not sure when. So let's try for Suzanne in New York. And what we'll do is let's see if we've got a little video that we can play for a minute or two. And we should have. Oh no! Let's play Rosie's robot waitress. That's sort of fun. Yeah.
How's this for a first? A robot has been employed as a waitress at the tea rooms and restaurants in Cobham, Surrey. She has enthralled all the customers. Her name is Teresa. She's very friendly, efficient, and they love her. She has built up a terrific fan base in the area. Take a look. Are you going to put Robot Teresa to work now?
Yes, she will gonna go to the carriage to the ladies with the kids.
I am going to work now. Hello, here is your dish.
What was the experience like?
It was interesting.
Children loved it.
Yeah, the children did.
Yeah.
Freya, what did you think of the robot?
Did you find her pleasant to
Yes.
talk
Yes,
to?
very polite.
Very polite. Very polite. Talk.
Hello, how are you today?
It's really simple to use, which is to press any table number and choose the dish and just press start, and then she's gonna go to the table which has been selected.
I am going to work now. Hello, here is your dish. Please take it away from my tray.
You wanna touch the red hand, so it will move hand.
The red hand?
Yeah, it's on each side.
I am going back to work now.
That was an amazing experience.
Yes, definitely. Really good.
Were you expecting anything like this at all this morning?
No, absolutely not.
She memorizes, she has her own base where she's always staying. She's not replacing any human being, it's just assist the person, like assist the waitress to help them. Maybe one day is gonna be our future, but at the moment like it's just for fun, for attract people, kids, and just have such a nice time here.
Hello, how are you today?
Well, there you are. Rosie and the robot waitress is an early version of artificial intelligence, and a fun version too. Now it's become very serious, and it helps people in a very real way. And it's a fun thing to do. Now, we haven't heard from Suzanne, but it's possible that she's waiting for 11 o'clock. So I'm going to hang on for a little while and see whether, in fact, we've got her. And we'll see if we have other things to. Now, yes, let's show Catch'em, because crime is Monday is our crime day. Let's show.
Yes, yes. My bank? Yes, yes. Of course. Absolutely. Right away. Hello, I'm Keith Hayes, with another edition of our crime show, Catch'em. I just said yes to a caller who told me he was from my bank and wanted details of my account. He said I needed to verify that a large sum of money had been transferred out. Well, there's no fool like an old fool, and I gave them to him. Sadly, of course, the call wasn't from my bank at all. It was from a member of a gang of con artists who wanted to gain access to my account and my cash. Actually, I didn't fall for it. But it's an old con, and each generation of criminals using it sound more plausible than the last lot. A team of these con artists has been operating in the Seaford area recently, so be on guard. The con men in this case have been bolder than most and pretended to be police officers investigating fraud at Argos. So far, the callers have been frustrated because their targets have recognized the call for what they are: fraudulent. But this is a common crime, and many people in a moment of panic fall for it and reveal bank and credit card details. They're very sophisticated, so don't fall for it. Keep your bank details and your cash to yourself. Along with the widespread use of computers has come online crime. Police in Sussex are investigating reports of online extortion threats to business enterprises. A gang has been making threats online that if their victims do not pay virtual currency into an online account, their websites will be attacked. Businesses in the hospitality sector have been especially hit by these thugs. In just a week, 5 businesses, restaurants, B&Bs and hotels across the county have reported receiving emails threatening to hack their websites. The criminals demand that the owners pay £500 by Bitcoin into an online payment address. The Sussex Police cybercrime team are investigating. Vandalism is the deliberate act of destroying or defacing the property of another person without permission. That includes graffiti. If you want to practice this art form, do it on your own house. If you do it on someone else's property, you've broken the law, no matter how pretty it is. It's a funny old country we live in, but do have a thought for people in France. They're breaking the law if they call a pig Napoleon. Back at home, it's illegal to keep a pigsty in front of your house. And rugby players take note, it's illegal to sing any profane or obscene song or ballad in any street. If Monday morning is wash day for you, then dry it in the back of the garden. It's illegal to erect a washing line across any street. And if you're visiting London, be patient in the Underground station. Under the terms of a bylaw, it's illegal to jump the queue in the tube ticket hall. Finally, a warning to our local MP. MPs are not allowed to wear armour in Parliament. A statute brought into law in 1313 forbids the wearing of armour by members of Parliament when they go to the House of Commons. The law has never been repealed. Standing on the outskirts of Lewes, the town's jail looks formidable. It was built in 1853, and over the years has played host to a number of famous names from the world of crime. The Russian prisoners from the Crimea War, who were held in the old naval prison, have become famous over time. There's a monument in St. John sub Castro churchyard to those inmates who died while in captivity. It's paid for by Russia. A play has been written about them, and only recently the Russian ambassador paid a visit to the site. Less well known is that 300 Finnish grenadiers, fighting for the Russians, were incarcerated in Lewes jail, not the naval prison. They were the new prison's first inmates. Several leaders of the Irish Easter Uprising in Dublin of 1916 were held there. They included Eamon de Valera, later the Republic's first president and prime minister. Probably the most famous murderer in the prison was John George Haig. He was known as the acid bath murderer. That's the way he tried to dispose of his victims. He appeared at Lewes Assize Court in July 1949 and was found guilty in just 17 minutes. He was hanged by the then famous Albert Pierrepoint in August 1949. A notorious local murder in 1912 saw John Williams hanged in Lewes Prison. Williams shot a police inspector in Eastbourne, for which he paid the ultimate price. The notorious Cray twins, Ronnie and Reggie, were imprisoned in Lewes jail in the 60s. The colourful, so-called celebrity gangsters managed to keep business going as usual while behind bars, hiring out protection teams to Hollywood stars. Frank Sinatra hired 17 of them from the Crays. No prison worth its salt can exist without at least one ghost, and Lewes is no different. Local gossip has it that one of the corridors is haunted by a man in Victorian-style prison garb. He is said to have dropped dead of a seizure when he saw his son enter the same block as a fellow prisoner. So keep your eyes peeled as you pass the prison on the way out of Lewes on the road to Brighton. You never know what you might see. And that's Catching for this week. Join me next week for another look and roundup of crime within the district of Lewes. Heath Hayes, South Downs TV. There's one crime that's still on the statute books that I haven't mentioned, and that's ringing somebody's doorbell and running away.
Well, it's a little bit of fun with information there, and we plan to run a catch-up weekly to supplement or complement our two bees, our two barristers, who are into such fascinating talks. So we let the time get away from us. I'm not sure whether I certainly sent to so we'll just hang around for a minute or two. Just a reminder of what the main news headlines were this morning. There were two main. One is that 007 is being recalled, or at least notionally recalled, because it would appear that we've got an international espionage ring working on behalf of China in the House of Commons. And there's an uproar that he should exist. Rishi Sunak is trying to talk the crisis down by talking to the Chinese delegation, to the convention that is taking place. Not really a convention. It's heads of government of G20 nations. And Rishi was said to have contemplated talking to the Chinese delegation about the present situation. It's a hot day out there again, 23, and it's going to stay that way probably for another 10 days. Not quite as hot as today, but still another 10 days. And tolerating that heat is well, the other main news item was the I wanted to say a landslide, and I'm sure that it triggered landslides. But the land tremors, shaking of the Earth's crust in Morocco, where 2,000 people, almost entire one village, are wiped out. And there is a warning that we may get that ourselves. I think that probably Suzanne isn't going to join us this morning, but if she does, we will come back. I think what we'll do for the moment is we'll say toodle-pip to this section and go and have a cup of coffee. Until either tomorrow at 8 o'clock or perhaps in 5 minutes or so if Suzanne makes an appearance. Let's say for the moment toodle-pip. Oh, we're still live.